Also developing tonight, Ukraine has reportedly now recaptured 2 key towns. We have the latest on the ground. But first, the ever-struggling Joe Biden is doubling down on regime change in Russia, putting the White House in as much disarray as ever, spinning in circles on every single front after yet another batch of very bizarre blunders that are sparking outrage from American allies all across the globe. We are now at a point where it is pretty much anyone's guess what the U.S. president actually means or is actually saying at any given time. Now, because just when you thought Biden couldn't get any worse, well, he did. And any more off message, he did. And any more divorce from reality, he is. Now, Joey is finding new ways to stoke confusion and chaos after his own administration had to clean up 3 huge separate remarks over just a matter of days about Putin's bloody invasion against Ukraine. Now, first up, last Thursday, Biden was asked about a possible chemical weapons attack by Russia, telling reporters it would trigger a response in kind. Watch this.
And to clarify on chemical weapons, if chemical weapons were used in Ukraine, would that trigger a military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind.
A response in kind, meaning we'll do the same thing. Now, shortly after, failed National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, he was forced to clarify Biden's remarks, saying it meant that the U.S. would, quote, respond accordingly. Well, why didn't Joe just say that? It only got worse from there. On Friday, Biden appeared to suggest the U.S. troops that they were headed to Ukraine. Listen in his own words.
Also, the average citizen, look at how they're stepping up. Look at how they're stepping up. And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle of front of a damn tank, just saying, I'm not leaving. I'm holding my ground.
You will see when you're there. Again, in comes the White House comms team to clean up those remarks. Quote, the president has been clear, we are not sending U.S. troops to Ukraine, and there is no change in that position. You'll see it when you're there. Anyway, that's not all, because on Saturday, Biden went off script during a speech, this time in Poland, and called for, again, regime change that they had already cleaned up against Putin. Watch.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principles, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
Make up your mind, Joey. Now, the media got giddy at that moment, even at that time attempting to compare him to Ronald Reagan and his comments, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Anyway, saying that it was similar, Biden suggesting, now, wow, he's finally a strong leader. But it was almost immediately in damage control mode again. Even Biden's own Secretary of State, the weak-winking Tony Blinken, directly contradicted Biden, saying regime change is not on the table yet again. And the White House said in a statement the president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. That's not what he said. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. Well, then again today, he seemed to message regime change. Never stops. Take a look.
Do you believe what you said, that Putin can't remain in power? Or do you now regret saying that because your government has been trying to walk that back? Did your words complicate matters?
Well, you asked 3 different questions. I'll answer them all. Number 1, I'm not walking anything back. The fact of the matter is I was expressing the moral outrage I felt toward the way Putin is dealing and the actions of this man. Just brutality of it.
Not walking anything back. So we're back now to regime change. You can decipher that. If you can, you get a gold star. But of course, we've all heard what Biden himself said. At this point, it's such a complete, utter embarrassment. It's humiliating to me. We have a president where even his own staff has no idea what he will say or what he will mean, or if anyone will even understand it. And it gets even worse, as Joey doesn't even think anyone walked back anything. And by the way, this was right after Biden doubled down on regime change. Take a look at this bizarre exchange with our own Peter Doocy earlier today. Take a look.
Are you worried that other leaders in the world are going to start to doubt that America is back if some of these big things that you say on the world stage keep getting walked back?
What's getting walked back?
It made it sound like, just in the last couple days, it sounded like you told U.S. troops they were going to Ukraine. It sounded like you said it was possible the U.S. would use a chemical weapon, and it sounded like you were calling for regime change in Russia, and we know...
None of the three occurred.
None of the three occurred?
None of the three.
Mr. President?
You interpret the language that way. I was talking to the troops. We were talking about helping train the troops that are the Ukrainian troops that are in Poland. That's what the context. I sat there with those guys for a couple hours. That's what we talked about.
So when you said you're going to see when you're there, you were not intending to
I was referring to meeting with and talking with the Ukrainian troops that were in Poland.
And when you said a chemical weapon use by Russia would trigger a response in kind.
It will trigger a significant response.
What does that mean?
I'm not going to tell you. Why would I tell you? You got to be silly.
The world wants to know.
The world wants to know a lot of things. I'm not telling them what the response would be. Then Russia knows the response.
As we just played, Peter Doocy was completely right. He said all three. So we have a president that clearly is not cognitively up to this job. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. The president's cognitive decline is dangerous. The Wall Street Journal today lays out in a brand new editorial. Listen to this, quote, "At what point does Joe Biden's verbal incontinence start to become a mortal threat to Americans? It's one thing to misidentify your vice president as the first lady, quite another to call for the ouster of an autocratic leader of a nation with nuclear weapons. And leaders around the world, they're noticing too. Allies and adversaries, all are taking notice. President Zelensky is reportedly less than impressed with Biden's recent remarks. The French president, we're getting lectured by the French now. Macron is telling French media he did not approve of Biden's word choice, and officials in Great Britain made similar comments. And of course, Biden's blunders are just another gift to brutal thug dictator, murderer with blood on his hands, Vladimir Putin, and the Russians as they continue to kill innocent men, women, and children all across Ukraine with indiscriminate bombing. I've been consistent since day one. No U.S. troops on the ground, none. But if you invade a sovereign nation, like Putin did, and you are killing men, women, and children, the blood is on the hands of the invader, in this case, Vladimir Putin. That would mean, according to the Hannity doctrine, you forfeit your right to lead any country, and frankly, you would forfeit your right to even live. Joe actually had it right for a second, but only a few minutes, and they walked it away. Anyway, sadly, we now have a president whose words can no longer be trusted and whose agenda is no longer clear, coherent, and comprehensible. So what is the Biden doctrine? Does anybody know? Does anyone in the White House know? Does Joe even know today's Monday? And if this wasn't bad enough, it's only going to get weirder and, frankly, much creepier. Look at this moment between Biden, a refugee in Poland, Joey talking about the woman's beautiful eyes. Her entire life has been upended. And this is, back comes Creepy Joe. Take a look.
I love you. I love you. How do you say in Ukrainian, "Люди, all those beautiful eyes"?
Твоя глаза очень красивые. Joaquin. Thank you very much.
Your father or your mother? Who had the eyes?
За маму или за папа?
За маму.
Mother's eyes.
You owe mama very big. You owe mama.
Joe, why didn't you stop at God love you? That would have been perfect. This young woman, a refugee, her entire life has been upended, and up pops old Creepy Joe. I'll ask again tonight, could Biden's presidency be going any worse than it is now? Inflation, 40-year high, through the roof. Gas prices, record high after record high. A nationwide food shortage looming. The border, a catastrophe. The Afghanistan withdrawal, a deadly debacle. And now we have war in Europe, and Biden and his own White House can't even keep the story straight. And meanwhile, China, they're threatening to invade Taiwan. I would expect that's going to happen. Iran now has never been closer to getting nuclear weapons. And you got Joe Biden sucking up to the mullahs of Iran in a deal that would make them rich as hell and allow even Vladimir Putin to broker the deal and help them build a nuclear facility. You got the dictator of Venezuela literally kissing the ass of a brutal, murdering thug dictator, begging OPEC nations over and over again, even though he gets turned down, to produce more oil, all while Biden continues to attack the oil and gas industry right here at home. We have more natural resources than we could ever use in 200 years. Look at your screen. Since Joey entered office, Biden has taken at least 81 anti-energy actions, 81 of them. He killed the Keystone Pipeline. By the way, the premier in Alberta said if we finished it, right now we would be getting 900,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada. He's implementing burdensome emissions regulations, cutting off drilling and auctioning on federal lands, and a whole host of other far-left, climate alarmist, religious cult policies, new Green Deal socialism. So Biden is failing on policy, he's failing on messaging, he's failing internationally and everywhere in between. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.